So, if you were raised digging the garden every year like I was, you might think that that's the only possible way you could start a garden. I mean, how could plants grow if you don't dig the soil first? Plants. But as it turns out, you can no-dig or no-till to start a garden.
What is this wizardry?
In fact, while some people think there's only one way to do no-till, there's actually many ways to do no-till. In fact, there's probably about a dozen. In fact, this video has 14 different ways to do no-till. So to start with, let's get out of the way all of the ones that I hate. The first is chemical no-till. Basically, this is the way that most people do no-till, and it's what most people associate with no-till. Really, it's a transition system. Usually the field has been tilled before at some point. You're just maintaining the tilled surface through chemical means. You plant a cover crop, then chemically kill the cover crop, plant in to that, then plant in your cover crop into the stubble of your crop. So the next two I don't like because they use plastic, and there's just too much plastic. Like I said before, I don't want to be dogmatic about it, but there's just too much plastic. So one is plastic solarization with tarp or black plastic mulch. Basically, you leave it on there for a month and it nukes everything underneath, including the soil biology, which is kind of the bummer. The next is just using black plastic mulch. White plastic mulch. Basically, it's the same as solarizing, only you leave it on there and you plant right into it. It probably increases the risk of phthalates contamination of your food.
But Mummy, we don't like phthalates.
Which I don't like. So number 4 is one that I do like. It's a great method of doing no-till, which is to till. Okay, well you only start by tilling, then you immediately convert to a no-till system, either with using deep mulch, or you just keep a really weed-free surface, you use really dense plantings, and maybe you just use a mulch over the winter, remove the mulch, plant into there, you're done. But you don't have to dig. Number 5 is probably the oldest way that humans have done agriculture, which is slash and burn. The traditional systems, they would cut down some forest, burn the debris that they didn't use, and then that would create a nice field that was also well fertilized and ready to go. The problem is today, it's difficult to replicate that because we have things like houses, and telephone poles, and dogs. But it can be done. You can do fire weeding and burning at home. I especially like it for native plantings because so many of our North American native plants were fire-dependent germinators. Number 6 is using deep mulch without a weed barrier. A lot of the sciencey types really like this. You just put a lot of mulch down on the ground. Has to be a really deep layer. Usually they like wood chip mulches. You get 6, 8, 10 inches of mulch down. Nothing is going to survive from underneath that. You don't even really need a weed barrier, though in some ways the weed barrier probably helps. One of the big problems with that is that you're using so many things like wood chips, and once you've got a lot of them, they break down really slowly, and to break down, they require a lot of nitrogen. So you can often get your crop plants breaking down on top of those. Suddenly you've got soil on top of your mulch on top of the soil, which means weeds can germinate again. So then what do? Do you add more mulch on top of your mulch? Or are you going to have like 2 feet of mulch? 5 feet of mulch? 10 feet of mulch? So it gets to be a management issue. Or you can do number 7, which is deep mulch with the weed barrier, usually cardboard or newspaper, and you put that on there, get your mulch down on top of it, you're done. That usually lasts a couple years longer. Usually you don't just have to use wood chips, so you can get something close to an 80-20 sort of nitrogen-carbon ratio like you would for the compost pile. You can Google that, and then that means that your mulch is going to break down pretty quickly, leaving you a nice weed-free bed to continue to plant into. Number 8, permaculture's most famous of all, the Hugelkultur. Hugelkultur! So this is the thingy with the logs and you put the dirt on top. Everybody knows about this thing now. It can be great, especially in the long term. You know, 5 or 6 years out, you're going to have really reliably nice soil built from this. The bigger problem is in the short term. There are applications where it works really well and some where it doesn't. I'd say looking at anecdotal reports online, it's about 50% of the time these just completely fail, and 50% of the time they work really great. So long term though, remember, you're going to get great soil. The bigger issue is once you're there, if you're having some of the problems with the Permaculture, which can be the weeds overrunning it and grasses, then you still got to figure out some way to turn that soil into a new garden bed. Sepulcher would just bulldoze it and plant into that. Number 9, mulch systems. A lot of people consider these to be the most sustainable and one of the most ancient ways that humans have ever done agriculture. In fact, in some places, people have continuous crop using mulch systems for something like 300 years. So we've been experimenting around a lot with this at Lily House 2. Basically, this is a system where you slash a cover crop or really resident vegetation. But basically, that's a system of growing mulch in place. So you grow your mulch in place, you slash it, you cut and plant into your mulch. Mulch! Next is flooding. Plenty of historic examples of this, or you could look up Fukuoka. Basically, this works great if you got a river or something and you can flood. Okay, being serious, there are other ways you could have to use flooding to flood weed fields. The other great thing about it is it basically automatically fertilizes too. This is the same as with number 11, animal tractor systems. For one of the most famous, you could look up Victory Gardens. Uncle Sam wants you to eat a chicken. So this was a system where you had a centrally located chicken coop, and then you would move the chickens into the one half of it, and they would eat all the insects and prep the soil and fertilize the soil, and the other side you had your garden, and then you annually rotate, and you move the chickens into the side where the garden was last year, and grow the vegetables where the chickens were the previous year. Which were used during World War II. But really, this is another ancient system. It's been done for a long time. A lot of times you use a combination of animals, but you could look up chicken tractors or rabbit tractors. Number 12, raised bed gardens, such as in the square foot gardening method. Basically, you build raised beds, you import soil. Good soil type is Mel's Mix, if you want to Google one. The drawback to this is you're not investing long term in developing your soil carbon. You got a weed barrier usually underneath there, you have a soil mix that breaks down really rapidly. And the second big problem is that they are notoriously bad at holding water. You'll use irrigation water more efficiently in this system because you can water the plants directly. But overall you use more irrigation water than you will in an in-ground system. Number 13, crimping. So by crimping we mean bending the plants over. If you bend them without breaking them, then that will usually kill the plant. If you bend it so hard that it snaps and breaks, it's just going to regrow new shoots. This is how I do my hair. So this is easy to do on the garden scale. A lot of people do it with a 2x4 on handles or strings, but it's also one that's very applicable for the broad acre scale. You could look up, Rodale has plans for a roller crimper. So the big drawback of the roller crimper system on broad acres is that it usually does require tilling intermittently at some points. And in some cases, I believe there are people who are doing NoTill, using roller crimper NoTill, who are actually tilling more than they used to when they didn't do NoTill. See, they till in the cover crop and they plant their cover crop, then they plant into the debris after they crimp that. And finally, number 14, you can just plant right into existing vegetation. In fact, there's even been a few studies that I've seen where people have planted into lawn. Yes, it works. Yes, I think it looks tacky. People love it because they love their lawns and then they have little lettuces growing in their lawns. What's the matter with people? A better way is you can leave lawn to grow out longer. I'll actually show you some of this in another video, and then you can plant into that. And it actually can work pretty well depending on the local ecology and soil types. So there it is, 14 ways you can start new garden beds without ever touching a shovel.